Morning Kids with Excite Media's new program, Sorted For Practice Social It's Thursday morning here on The Kick, here at Excite Media in the studios that we have in Hale Street. And listen, if you're ever in the city, we're just opposite Suncorp Stadium. We'd love to see you if you want to pop in. I don't know if you know the old Lamont building. It's actually like a Shakespearean theatre, a great creative space, and we'd love to be able to show you around. Meet the team of nearly 30 digital professionals dealing in websites and SEO. And of course, we love basically taking a young business, growing it to the next level, looking for those opportunities where maybe you've got new customers or maybe you want to take a new geographic territory. We are here to work with you on that. Well, on The Kick, we've been bringing ideas to help grow your business in digital and marketing. And one idea that's getting a lot of legs of late is, what about writing a book? Maybe it's your business story. Maybe it's about your expertise. And I knew somebody who was absolutely brilliant in this space. It's Cathryn Mora, who's going to be on the show to help us out. So let's bring Cathryn into the show and find out just a little bit more about what she's been doing and exactly what the background was that led her into doing all this amazing writing. Cat, it's absolutely wonderful to have you on The Kick on this Thursday. We're going to be gleaning lots of your expertise. Welcome to The Kick.
Thanks, Andrew. As you were talking about being in Hale Street, I just was thinking, I feel like when I met you, you were in a completely different building and then you moved there. So that must have been a long time.
When you think back, would you believe that Excite Media was working in a number of retail stores and we would take clients from one building to the other? Now we're in this lovely building in Hale Street. But you're right, it was a number of years ago we met. You were involved in marketing and communications at that time. And I'm just intrigued because I've been following what you've been doing with book writing and coaching, helping people on collaborative projects. How did that journey start? How long ago did the idea into becoming the book coach queen or guru take place?
I accept either of those titles, queen or guru. Well, it's been quite a while. So I actually published a novel back in 2015 or 2016, I think it was. And didn't really, like, it did really well. I had lots of media coverage, and it was a novel that was inspired by my real life experiences on board a cruise ship. And the book did well, but not enough to retire on millions of dollars. And so I stayed in my marketing and PR role for a little while. And then eventually I just felt this urge to do something new. I'd been doing the marketing and media for 15 years, and I just kept feeling like I want to change. And so I eventually ended up studying coaching. And I'd never even heard of coaching until my husband at the time mentioned it. I went and did a diploma and absolutely loved it. It blew me away, the power of coaching. So when I tried to then start my own coaching business, I spent about a year and could not get any traction for what I was doing. And I think I started off doing one thing and then another, and I just couldn't seem to get the clients in the door. And then I worked with a business coach who said to me, "What are you most proud of?" And I said, well, when I think about it, what I'm most proud of, I mean, apart from being a mother and all of that stuff, is actually finishing the first draft of that novel that I wrote, years ago. And I said that, like, I had a baby and a full-time job, and I managed to write this book. It did take me 2 years because I didn't know the secret at the time to actually getting a book written. But writing the end on this novel a couple of days before New Year's, it was, back in 2013 or whatever that was, I just felt so proud of myself because, being a parent and a business owner or at the time an employee, was so difficult. To manage to get something done, which was really quite consuming, was the greatest feeling I had ever had. And to this day, it probably remains my greatest achievement. And she said, well, why don't you help people market their books? Because I'd had that background in marketing. And I said, well, like, I could, but I'm a bit bored with marketing right now. Like, I'd like other people to do that. What I want to do is help people get the book written and help other people achieve that feeling that I had, which is the greatest. She said, well, help people write their books then. And that was back in 2017. We had that discussion. And here I am now in my 5th year of helping people write books.
That's an awesome story. And listen, we shared earlier when we were promoting today's episode that they say that 81% of Americans have a book inside them, but so few of us get that book outside of us and actually get it published. And I know exactly what you mean. You know, confession time here. There's 1, 2, 3, 10 book ideas in Andrew that haven't got anywhere. And you get flustered and you think it's trickling every time you see an idea in a movie or something you experience in life. You think that could go in one of the chapters of my book, and you still don't write it. Now, we're going to be talking about how to write a business book.
Mm-hmm.
We're also got a very special offer for you that Cathryn's put together to help you get started. We're going to be talking about her Endless Inspiration Action Plan. Stay with us right to the end of the kick today, and you'll get some details about how you can get access. But Kat, what do we do? Well, actually, let's start with why should we do it? What's the reason for writing a business book? Give us some kind of momentum and motivation as to why we should get underway.
Yeah, and look, there's sort of a couple of different reasons that people tend to come to me with, but they can also work together, those reasons. So a main reason that people will come to me and say they want to write a book is to help people, whether it's self-help or business, you know, or perhaps they want to share their life story. People will say, oh, I just really want to help people. I really want to impact people. I want to educate, change, you know, inspire, that sort of thing. And that's a really beautiful reason. I do find that that's not often enough to get you over the line to get it done, because the other reason that can work in tandem with that is raising your profile to be seen as an expert in your industry. So give coaching as an example. Back when I was trying to start my coaching business and I was helping people with changing careers or starting a business, and there are so many coaches that do that, writing a book is one of the ways that you can raise your profile and be seen as an expert in that area, like a go-to person in your industry. The moment you do that, you elevate yourself above the competition. And you can use it in so many ways, because once you have a book and you are that expert, you might get invited to be on a panel, you get invited to be on podcasts, you get opportunities to get in front of more people. So you might get speaking. A lot of my clients do professional speaking once they have a book, or if they were doing speaking beforehand, they actually use the book to get more gigs. I had one client get 5 gigs at $10,000 a pop in the first week that her book was out. Another client in the US, that first one was in Brisbane, but the one in the US, she was charging 12 to 15,000 to speak in a keynote or a subject matter expert speech about her marketing tool that she created. 12 to 15K. And when her book came out, her fee went up to 20 to 25. And she said to me, you have to have a book to charge 20,000, because all the big boys have a book. So there's a lot of opportunity once you have a book to expand your horizons and open a whole lot of doors of opportunity.
And it's interesting, there's many people that have gone before us with this. I'm just reaching across a desk and picking up one of Michael Hyatt's books about no-fail meetings. And isn't it interesting? There's so much power in what appears to be between the pages. And it doesn't have to be kind of a Lord of the Rings size book to make a difference. But you're right. Suddenly it adds credibility to the conversation. It opens doors. And there's some amazing stories there of people actually in terms of getting speaking engagements. But maybe I'm just a small player. I'm not wanting to become a world-class speaker, but I do want to be able to get something out of me. So how do we start? What's the kind of stage one?
So there's kind of 5 main stages that I take clients through, that when people write a book on their own, they tend to miss these things. They just sit there and start writing, and then they get stuck, and that's why most people don't finish. But the first one is to actually get clear why you want to write it. Because unless you have, it's sort of like they say with any of your life goals, unless you have the destination in mind, you tend to get lost along the way, you know, on the journey, like the whole GPS analogy. So if you know, why do I want to write this book? What am I trying to achieve? What do I want to get out of it for me? Yes, you want the reader to get XYZ, but what do you want to get out of it for your career, for your business, for your legacy? Some people just want to write it to leave a legacy for their family, etc. So first is getting clear exactly how you're going to leverage the book and why you want it in your life, because that gives you the beginning of the motivation. The next thing you need to do is be really clear, what kind of book do I want? Do I want to write my life story? And if so, do I want that in that creative nonfiction style, so it's written like a novel? Do I want to write a self-help book? Do I want to write a business book? I give my clients homework and my students as well, who use the Endless Inspiration Action Plan, the course, different things like that. There's homework in there that gets them really clear on the exact like genre and style of how you want to write, because as you would know from having read different books, there's a multitude of ways that you could write the book. So getting clear on the voice, it's still going to be your voice, but the genre and tone and style of your book. The next thing you need to do is get really clear on your audience, because everybody is not going to read your book. And for anyone who's only on audio, I'm doing air quotes around everybody, because you need to have your target audience, like hitting a bullseye. Other people will hear about it and read it, and it could take on a life of its own, but you need to be really clear, because you would know as like a marketer, your marketing message needs to be very specific, and unless you know exactly who you're speaking to, then that falls away. The other thing you have to do is write an outline and think about what topic you want to be covering, where you want the reader journey to begin and where you want it to end. What do you want the reader to think, feel, or do when they're finished reading your book? Do you want them to work with you? Do you want them to take action in something? What is it you want the reader to do? Because that's going to tell you what information you give them in the book. And the readers that you attract are the people who will be in your world for the next couple of years when you talk about the book. So if you are bored of talking about whatever your business is and you're ready to do something new, then you need to think about what the book topic will be to attract those new people that you want in your world. So there's a whole lot of steps that come first before you write anything.
Kat, you've given us so many great pieces of the puzzle there. And I get the feeling that all of us need a little bit of a guide to actually take us through that. Otherwise, left to our own devices, we come to a grinding halt. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Funnily enough, I was listening to an author on a podcast just the last 2 days and said, there are two different ways of writing. One, you write for a specific audience. One, you write for yourself. This particular author said he got more momentum of writing the book he wanted to read rather than trying to think of somebody else's. Is that just two different methodologies in terms of the way you write?
Yeah, well, I suppose in my experience, people who write for themselves will often fall over in chapter 2, because one day they'll be really inspired to write and they think, oh, I just want to get this feeling out, and they will start writing and be really inspired. And then the next day they wake up, they look at a blank page and they think, oh, what am I going to write today? Now, I guess I can give you an example of someone who's written for themselves. I had a client, one of my first-ish clients, like maybe one of my first 15 clients sort of thing. She had gone through really, really difficult times as a teenager. She'd been sexually assaulted by a family member repeatedly over a number of years and hadn't told anyone, and eventually did and wasn't believed, and a whole lot of traumatic things happened. And as an adult, a lot of her experience and behaviors, it played out in her life without her kind of clicking what really the cause had been. And when she got therapy for it, ended up doing, really well, but we connected on social media and she said to me, I feel like this book is a cork in my soul. And I feel like if I write the book and let the cork go, that all of this other amazing stuff, like cracking open a champagne, all this other amazing stuff's going to come out. And she actually didn't want anyone to even read the book, because she said to me, I don't want people to read what happened. And it wasn't focused on the incidents of the teenage years. It was focused on the behavior as an adult. She said, I don't want everyone to read that, but I want to write the book and get it out of me. And it's really funny because she said she knew if she did it, and she's a journalist, by the way. So she said she knew she can write, and she knew that if she wrote it on her own, it would never happen. So she employed me. We worked for 16 weeks, got her first draft done. And it's only ever remained first draft because she doesn't want anyone to read it. And we caught up in 2020, just before Christmas. And she'd finished the book in 2018, just before Christmas. And we had a Zoom because she's in Perth and I'm in Brisbane. And I said, how's it going? And she said, oh my gosh, I had to talk to you because I had to tell you what's happened in the last 2 years. And she rattled off this amazing, she said, I've studied this and I've started a business and I've got clients in Brazil and England and France and I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I wrote this other book and I did this and this. And she said, I feel like it was all possible because I wrote that book.
Yeah.
And like, I still feel a bit emotional picturing her like glowing. And we'd had sessions where she'd say, I can't do it this week, because talking about the thing had brought stuff up, and it was so difficult some weeks. And then seeing her glowing, I went, wow, like, this is payoff, you know?
Going back to writing a business book, I can imagine there's actually a reasonably methodical process, although for each person the outcome might be different. Let's talk about that just for a moment in terms of how you get from A to B, actually writing it. I can imagine there's an editing process that puts the finesse on it, makes it readable, makes it publishable. But do we all need some form of accountability to actually get the content out?
Yes, and sorry if I took us too much off track there with that story.
No, it's a brilliant story.
There is definitely a process with all books, and especially business books, that once you've got your outline down, so you definitely need to have that outline there. You can change your mind, because you might get halfway through and think, I didn't talk about this thing, you know. And once you've decided on the style of business book, because again, business books now are coming more in more of a casual kind of approach to the writing, and people using stories of themselves or clients. So there's still some storytelling in there often as well to make it come to life for the reader. But I get people to, my clients, for example, write a little bit every day, ideally. And having the accountability, I have to say, obviously that's what I do, but it does make a difference, because every client I've ever had in the last 4 and a bit years has said to me, if it was not for you, I wouldn't have written anything this week. You know, and they make jokes saying, I didn't want to get in trouble, so I had to write something. But you know what it's like if you're on a deadline, that last few days or hours is super powerful. And so with writing a book, there is that accountability, makes a massive difference. But the other thing is writing a little bit every day. So often the mistake people make writing on their own, or even when they first come to me, is that they'll say, okay, I'm going to write for 4 hours on a Sunday morning when the kids are playing video games or something. Or I'm going to write for 3 hours on a Friday afternoon when my wife takes the children to sport, or, you know, whatever the thing is. But I have to tell you that 3 or 4 hours, it never happens. Or people who say, I'm going to take a week off work and on their holidays I'm going to write. No, you're not, because you're exhausted. And when you have your week off, you're going to sleep, right? So writing a little bit every day makes a massive difference. 15 minutes even. And that's how I ended up getting my book done, is writing for 15 minutes a day. Now, 15 minutes a day probably won't get the whole book written, but what it will do is create that momentum. Because when you're writing 15 minutes every day and you sit down, I did mine at 7:30 p.m. and I'm normally a morning person, but once I had a baby and he was all consuming in the morning and I was getting ready for work as well, 7:30 p.m. was my time. And I used to say to myself, just sit there for 15 minutes. It doesn't matter if you write one sentence, just sit there. And 7 days a week, I sat there for 15 minutes. And I did have a writing mentor, by the way, who was checking my work every week as well. But a little bit every day. Once you start doing that, you feel like an author. You start seeing it come together. You start seeing it taking shape. Then suddenly, instead of watching Netflix for an hour, you say, you know what? I'm actually going to work on my book for an hour. And I have clients right now, one who just messaged me yesterday saying she can't stop thinking about the book, and she's at a conference and now she's feeling frustrated because she wants to go home and finish that chapter. So creating momentum is a massive key to that process. And
So a lot of us would think about writing a book as going from page 1 to page 300, you know, writing it in that linear format. But I know that, for instance, some of the great movies, they actually shoot the last scene first. So do we have to write from beginning to end? Can we just dump it all out and then somebody puts it in the right order later?
I'm not going to say no, you can never do that, because obviously sometimes things work for people that are a little unconventional, right? But I will say that if one of the things that sometimes people try and do is they'll come to me with 2 years of notes. They'll say, I've been thinking about this book for 2 years and I've written in my journal here and my notebook there and I've typed up this, and they'll put all these things and they'll kind of dump them on the table, metaphorically speaking, and say, let's make a book out of it. It's actually harder to do that way, I can tell you, because it's almost like going to the cupboard the day before shopping day and you've got like 6 completely random ingredients and you try and what I do is I Google like recipe zucchini, legumes and rice, like I try and shove it all together in some random recipe to make it work. It's similar to doing your book with random notes you've written. That's one thing. The other thing people try and do is write. They might have a blog and they'll try and make the blog into a book. And yes, there's going to be someone who tells me, I've seen this really successful book made out of blog posts, and occasionally it's happened. But often what happens is it's disjointed because you're trying to force things together rather than say, what do I want to achieve? What's the reader journey? And then writing your outline, which is how we do it. They're trying to force all these things together and kind of shortcut the book. It doesn't really work. Doing it out of order, I have had clients do that. But the reason they tend to do it out of order is because one particular day they'll feel really inspired to do that chapter about the time that this happened with a client or something. And that's fine, except what tends to happen is they start leaving the more difficult chapters till the end. And then the book falls over 2/3 of the way through because they've done all the favorite fun chapters. And then they've got to do the chapters where they had to remember something or they had to do some research. So I just find it tends to work best linear, even though there might be some things that people are struggling to get through. Once it's done, the editing comes later and we can talk about that process. There are multiple processes of the editing stage that you can polish up the things that you weren't that enthused to write.
Well, obviously, one of the things that people can come to somebody like yourself, Kat, is to get that advice and get a skeleton and get a process that would work for them. And it's that one-on-one coaching that you offer as well. Let's have a look at where you can get hold of Kat. If you head across to changeempire.com. Sorry?
Don't grab hold of me too hard. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Yes, exactly. So if you'd like to know more, you can head across to changeempire.com and be able to find out more about the services that Kat is able to offer. And I was just having a bit of a glance around, and there's so much that Kat's able to walk through with people. We'll just kind of get this over here, which makes it a little easier. You can find out more about her one-on-one book coachings. We're going to talk about the Endless Inspiration Action Plan very shortly. Kat, talk very briefly about ghostwriting and co-writing. What's involved in that type of process?
Yeah, I love it. Actually, I'm just talking to someone at the moment about potentially writing some amazing Indigenous stories in that way. So ghostwriting and co-writing is really for people, to sort of put it fairly bluntly, who are, what do they say, cash rich and time poor, right? Because writing a book, the way I teach and guide it is to do these small chunks every day. So it's doable for everybody for sure. But there are people who are obviously at this stage where they really want to get the story out because they have an idea for how they can utilize the book. Maybe they can get a publishing deal or whatever it is, but they just don't want to put themselves in the headspace of writing it. Or maybe they just really struggle with writing to the point that it's actually not fun, but they might be great at telling their story. So I sit down with people and interview them and record that interview and get it transcribed, and I learn all about that person and maybe speak to their, depending if it's what type of book it is, speak to their colleagues or their family, etc., to get a feeling of them and actually write pretending to be that person. Now, co-writing is a slightly more budget-friendly version of that, where someone, and I've done this for a few people, where they've written a draft of their book on their own, and they come to me and they say, you know what, I actually just don't think it's very good. And I can see people are giving me feedback how to improve it, but I can't quite make it happen. One guy said to me, he had it developmental edited, and he said, I can see what she needs me to do. He said, but I just feel like I don't have that skill to polish it, to make it what I know it needs to be. So we actually sat together, and over a period of months, we'd do 3 or 4 hours at a time with a little tea break, and I would write. So I'd say to him, what did you mean when you were saying this? And he'd say, well, it was this time when this and this. And I'd say, oh, hold on. And then I'd type, and he'd say, yes, that's what I meant to say. So I actually co-write with people to fix their first draft into a much better second draft, and then it's ready to sort of edit and publish.
Brilliant. And some other services that Kat offers, you can do a strategy call with her and also find out about publishing only packages. Going through the website, you find out exactly how integrally that Kat is able to work with clients, really drawing out the best of them, enabling them to get that book created and guiding them through the process. So head along to changeempire.com. You'll find out more. You can also make sure that you catch up with Kat online. So if you head over to Facebook, just look up there, Cathryn Mora Coach, and you'll find out details about what we're about to talk about, the Endless Inspiration Action Plan. Now, this sounds like a great way for people to be able to get a little bit of momentum when the idea's there, it's on the tip of their tongue, it's something they just want to actually start doing. So if we head across to the Endless Inspiration Action Plan page, talk to us about what this experience is. Is this a course? It says, no, it's not a course. So what are we actually getting here?
And look, initially, this was the 5 steps I talked to you about that I just did with clients. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, I created a course because people were on a bit more of a budget, they were at home, etc. And so I created a course that helped people. And these first 5 steps are really the core of what was the course. But then over time, I guess what I realized is that there are so many courses available and people don't necessarily finish them. I wanted something a bit more interactive, that it was a bit more of a tool online. Sorry if you can hear that. My dog is scratching at the door, desperate to come in. So I took those first 5 modules of the course and actually created a tool where you go on and you're ticking boxes and answering questions. And it just gives it a bit more of a tool, like a bit more of a user-friendly approach to talk you through all those things you need to think about before you sit down and write your book. And so once you're done, you sort of click a button and you can even print out a PDF that you can have sitting there if you want, or you can keep it online. And that's going to help you form the foundation and the preparation you need to start writing your book. And it's going to mean you're organized so that you're never sort of sitting there looking at a blank page. You've thought about everything, you have that outline, and you're ready to go.
Absolutely brilliant. So there you go. You've got now something that you can take action on. You can contact Cathryn, endlessinspirationactionplan.com. Just want to talk very quickly about another way of writing that I've come across. I saw that you were involved in a friend of mine who's a nurse and collaborated with some other people to write a book that you coordinated. Could you explain what was involved there?
Yeah, so we do these anthologies or co-authored books every now and then. I'm doing the 4th one now, and we've just announced the 5th one that we're taking applications for. And so this is a book with 20 or so authors who all are writing a chapter each. And it came about a few years ago, the first one, because someone who wanted to work with me on a book emailed me and said, look, I really don't have the time, money, energy, etc., to do my own book. Have you ever thought of doing one of these? And I'd looked at some of them online and gone, I don't know about that. And then I thought I could apply what I do as a coach. Instead of to one-on-one client, I'll just do it for 20 clients. So for 20 new authors. And so I've created this process where everyone's writing a chapter each, but I don't just get them to email it in. We actually have a bunch of meetings first where I am teaching them how to write, teaching how to pick the topic that they want to talk about, how to structure their chapter, how to write in an engaging way so that you keep the reader in the story and that sort of thing. And so the one you read, Medicine Women, was all female doctors and health professionals, because I actually had a doctor involved in the previous anthology, and she said to me, can you do an anthology that's like just female doctors? And it was incredible. Did you read the whole thing?
Yes, actually, I've got the copy, but I haven't begun reading it. So you've caught me out. But there you go. Hold me accountable.
Yeah, well, it's a great process, because if someone wants to write their own book, for example, this is like a toe in the water to see what it's like to write and to experience the planning process, the writing process, the editing process, because they still get developmental edit, line edit, proofread, to see how the whole process works end to end, but they're only having to write one chapter. So it's a really great way of kind of putting your toe in the water, so to speak. And we're about to, in a month, oh my gosh, 26th June. So literally a month today, at the time of recording, we're publishing The Path, which is spiritual growth and inspirational stories. So that's going to be super fun. And we're about to do a dating anthology with sort of funny, sexy, tragic, and disastrous dating stories.
And I'm sure there are plenty of those which will make that a very big book, possibly with a sequel to come back. Kat, it's been wonderful to have you on The Kick. Thank you very much for giving us some rounded advice on how to write a business book. And so, if you're thinking about the fact that you'd like to get your authority known, get your expertise in the market, simply to get that book off your chest, then you can check out Cathryn Mora online at Facebook or changeempire.com. Thanks very much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, Andrew. Loved it.
So this has been another edition of The Kick. The team are always willing to work with you on creative ways to grow your business. Make sure that you check us out at excitemedia.com.au. Love to be able to talk to you about what your plans are for 2023. Yep, it's just around the corner. And also keep in mind that at the moment we've got those special tax write-offs that have been put out there. So if you'd like some assistance in getting something happening before the end of June to make sure that whether it's a website or some digital marketing, please the accountant, make sure your website is ready, and then grow your business. We'd love to be involved. We'll see you next week on another edition of The Kick.